like it's streaming. All right. Where is everybody? Hmm. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and start. Um, so we're excited to welcome Michael Panisello, who's here with us tonight to talk about UFO sightings in Connecticut. Michael is the state director of Connecticut MUFON. He's been a UFO investigator and researcher. He's been the state director of MUFON since 2013. So he's going to share his presentation with us. Thank you for coming, Michael, and thanks to everybody for being here.
Thank you for having me. So I will keep it within an hour, I promise. So thanks for having me, and let's just dive in and talk a little bit about myself in a minute. So every lecture I do, I start off with this quote by J. Allen Hynek. Ridicule is not part of the scientific method. For those of you that may know who he is, if you're a fan of ufology, if you're a researcher, if you don't know who he is, you maybe have heard of Project Blue Book.
Yep.
Yep.
Project Blue Book started in the 1960s. It was a continuation of earlier research reports by the government, Project Sign, then Project Grudge. And the purpose of Project Blue Book was to finally put to rest what was being seen in the skies in our skies. And from Project Blue Book, you get a lot of the kind of traditional, well, it's swamp gas, it's hot air balloons, it's people's imaginations, it's lights in the sky. It kind of comes out of there, a little bit from Project Grudge. The Project Blue Book finally ended by a committee called the Condon Committee. Basically was hired to sum up all the research that was found in Project Blue Book and come to a conclusion. And the conclusion is what I just said. It was really nothing to this in the way of extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. That being said, there are some Blue Book files that have yet to been fully identified and are left as unknown. We'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. But the reason I go back to this quote is for two reasons. One, Alan Hynek, in my opinion, I consider him the father of modern ufology because he took away that idea of, well, let's let's look for the evidence because before that, you say, oh, I saw a sighting. Okay, great. Well, that's nice. Or I think something's was a sighting. He kind of went and said, well, let's look at the evidence. Was it truly a UFO? Was there physical evidence? Was there debris? Was there any kind of markings on the person's body? What is the evidence? And that's the way modern ufologists or should be approaching the field, and that's the way MUFON approaches the field. And this is important because ufology, has always been that fringe science for a lot of reasons. We won't get into the specifics. Some of it we kind of did to ourselves, some of it society has put on to us. But if you're going to do this in a scientific manner and you present your information in a scientific way, before you ridicule us and say we're the people with the tinfoil hats, hear us out. And that's the purpose of tonight's PowerPoint is to show you some examples of sightings in Connecticut that, in my opinion, in my research, has shown to have some significant evidence that leads to you believe that there is something more to this than just someone's imagination or someone's misinterpretation of a natural or a man-made object. So who am I? I always put this quote in for the very reason is if you're going to talk about something, what gives you the credentials to talk about it? If you're just someone that's kind of started in a field and a couple of years ago, I mean, you might do a deep dive into it, but what really makes a person credible? What gives me the credibility to sit up here and talk to you guys about these sightings and say, hey, there's something to this? Well, here are my credentials. I've been involved in UFO researching for over 12 years. I've been involved in ufology for 25 years, and what that means, I've been doing a lot of research for investigations. I'm part of the MUFON strike team. I'm a field investigator. I work on CAG International, so I did cases all over the country. All right, Connecticut skies. Before we actually dive into some of the sightings, it's important to rule out the IFOs, the identified flying objects. Whenever you do an investigation, whenever we do an investigation, the first thing we have to do is rule out what are the man-made objects? What is out there? And what's in our skies already? And the reason I added this slide is really was an afterthought to this PowerPoint presentation. It was not in my original um, presentation. And the reason is someone asked me is, do we have busy skies? The answer is yes, we do. Connecticut has extremely busy skies. You would think, California and Florida and New York, the city area absolutely are much more busy than ours. But if you go out on a nice night with a clear sky, you can see a lot of stuff. Aircraft are the most common. So this is a shot from a software called Flight Radar 24. It's free. You can go on the internet and look at it now. But you can see all of the planes that are in Connecticut's airspace. And this is just one clip of it, but you can go at any times during the day. The thing about this is that when you start looking at our skies, you start seeing patterns, like, planes going into Boston. A lot of times they'll start their approach over the shoreline of Connecticut. Um, Planes going over to the poles from JFK will go along our Connecticut-New York border and vice versa. Planes coming into Bradley, a lot of times that are landing on runway 24 come in, if they're coming from the Chicago, the west, they'll come over the Berkshires. Any of you ever been to Six Flags, New England, you've probably seen a lot of aircraft flying very low over the park. That's because they're going into Bradley. So there's patterns to our skies, and this is important when we're doing UFO research because we have to know what's the man-made objects before we can truly identify what is an unknown or UFO. It's also important to distinguish that UFOs, the unidentified flying object, associated with aliens is really kind of a Hollywood stereotype. UFologists, and then this in my field, in my way of looking at it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's um, extraterrestrial, but there are some that are. So what does that mean? What was kind of a little bit of double talk, Mike? Well, let's go into the numbers. If you were to look at this is just a general assumption, but based on some information, some data that I've collected over the years, if you were to take 100%, 78% IFOs, they're navigation lights, planets, stars, misidentified, Chinese lanterns, weather balloons, toy balloons, like the little Mylar balloons you buy at Party City, satellites, space debris. All of those are like 75% of what's in our skies. Of that, 20% is classified aircraft, insufficient data or historical. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's a lot of examples of classified aircraft being misidentified as unknown aerial vehicles, UFOs. The F-117, the SR-71 Blackbird, the U-2, the F-22 prototypes, the multitude of drones that the US government flies now were all once the B-21 Raider, the new bomber that they're building, the early prototype of that. All of these were identified as unknown objects until they became declassified, and researchers started looking at where these things were created and tested and matching that up to UFO reports. But there are some aircraft that are never going to be declassified. They're either proof of concept or they're still active and whatever that was created is so sensitive that they're just never unclassify it. And those are always going to be an unknown. That doesn't mean that what's up there is an alien or extraterrestrial or interdimensional. It just means that we don't know what it is because we don't have the information to classify it. And insufficient data might actually be one of those. So sometimes with insufficient data is if it's a vague sighting. Well, I saw something in the sky. When did you see it? It was in the spring sometime. It was early fall, maybe. maybe April, May, or the times are a little different. Or it was a few years back and some of the information we can't get a hold of. Not everything is foiable, but we try to get a lot of information through the public record. And then if we can't figure out what it is, we might say there's just not enough information to determine what it is. And so we can call it insufficient information. Historical. Well, I saw something in 1960 when I was a kid. Great, thank you for documenting it with us. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do to investigate that. The witnesses have moved on. Oh, there's no way to get radar data or any kind of historical data or talk to the local police or anything like that to get corroborating evidence. So we list it as a historical. Of that, 2% is truly unknown, and the 2% are what we're going to talk about today. This is the traditional crafts, the like what you see on the videos. That they meet all the criteria of what a UFO is. And we'll talk about those criteria throughout the PowerPoint. So I'm not going to go into them in detail here, but as we go through the PowerPoint, I'll point them out and why they match what is we consider, or I consider, a UFO of alien origin, possibly. So these are some examples of identified flying objects. I already mentioned them before. And these are some examples of UFOs. These are the most common UFOs that we have. Uh, Triangle shapes are very common in Connecticut. They're very common along the Connecticut-New York border. Orbs are now becoming more popular. We're getting a lot more cases regarding those. Pointed triangles, we don't get too many of those. Traditional flying saucers, we used to get a lot of those, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that in today's PowerPoint. Cylinder UFOs, we don't really get many of those, but they're common in the field. And like I said, secret military aircraft. So this is going to look for patterns. Patterns and commonalities are how we can really determine if something is truly a UFO because they match a pattern. Um, and that's what we're going to look at tonight. So let's dive into it. So past UFO sightings. First one we're going to look at is this from 1969. Now you can see what this looks like, and for those of you that can read it, it's right here, but the description says it was a pipe-like object. It was silvery and had a pipe-like projections coming from the object. The child said that it was made a noise like a jet aircraft. Now, in the back of your mind, keep in mind two things as a pattern: the pipe-like objects on it and the sound that the objects make. Now, if we were to see this today, it kind of looks like a mylar balloon. It's hard to say, but um, it's part of the Connecticut historical record. It's because it's in the newspaper, so that's why we're including it in today. But it also has the pattern of the nose and the spikes on the aircraft, the noise and the spikes. So the next one is in Winsted, Connecticut in 1980. Now this one is very interesting. This is one of my members actually witnessed this. It was himself and his friend and their wives. They were outside. They were looking at the tree line, and they noticed an object, a traditional looking triangle, um, hovering. And it stayed there for a while, and then it went on an angle, 45 degrees, and it took off. Now, I mentioned Bob Lazar, and I'm not going to really dive too much into Bob Lazar. For those of you that follow ufology, you probably know who Bob Lazar is. For those of you that don't know who Bob Lazar is, real quick, Bob Lazar is supposedly a whistleblower. He worked at an area called S4. S4 was a secret project and a secret location that reverse engineered alien technology. It was where Area 51, Groom Lake or Dreamland in Nevada. It was slightly to the southeast, southwest of that location. Now, it's your decision whether you believe him or not. He's very controversial in the field. He, some people believe him 100%. Some people think he's making things up. I am not here to discuss that with you. The reason I mention it is because of something that he says later on. in one of his interviews, and that's what I want to talk about today. So this is another example of the UFO article. It was again same sighting, just a different magazine. This was in 1980, talking about how when this craft took off, it inclined to an angle and then left. Now, Bob Lazar made his debut on the UFO field in an interview in 1989 with George Knapp. And in subsequent interviews and in one of his latest movies, he talks about how these craft power themselves, how they move, how the engines work. And what he says is that in the base of the UFO, there is like two little nacelles that turn down. And when the engine is about to turn on and propel the ship, the craft actually goes on an angle and then takes off. Now, what's interesting about that, in my opinion, is that this is 1989, and later he says it in subsequent interviews. But in 1989 and 1980, someone saw this. So 8 years before, in a completely different part of the country, Bob Lazar is out in Nevada. This witness was in Winsted, Connecticut. Any of you been to Litchfield County? It's a very rural area. You don't have social media, you don't have the internet. So how did these two say the same thing? How do they see a craft do the same thing? Unless it actually happened, in my opinion. I find it interesting that that time frame. It's so I think that's a pattern. To me, that makes Bob Lazar a little more credible because I have an actual case that matches what Bob Lazar is saying, and it was not after Bob Lazar. So you can't say, well, the witness was influenced by what Bob Lazar said. It was before Bob Lazar. And you could say, well, Bob Lazar might have been influenced by what the witness saw and reported in the newspaper article, but what are the odds of two obscure regional local newspapers being read by someone across the country in the 80s? I think it's pretty slim. The other thing that's interesting about Lazar is he says how these things are powered. It was powered by an element 115 in 1989. That didn't exist, but in 2003, it was discovered and it's on the periodic table now. So if he isn't telling the truth, how do you know about this element? Again, I'm not here to argue for or against him. You can make your own decisions on Bob Lazar. I'm just telling you what he said and what the witness said. And I think the coincidence between the two, how they match, is pretty interesting. North Granby in 1969. The patterns here and what makes this common amongst UFOs is sightings is the objects in the red. It was all white in color. It was white in color. It had white lights. Um, a lot of craft have white lights on them. It was disc-shaped. A lot of UFOs are disc-shaped, with a dome on the center. So this is a traditional UFO craft being described, the kind that you would think of with the little top. A lot of these craft have lights. It was very close to the object. The witnesses were only 50 feet to the right. The object stayed in one place for about 10 minutes. Um, Now, what's interesting here is remember what I said at the beginning of this lecture about Alan Hynek and the Condon Committee, and I said that it was designed to basically solidify the position that there's everything that's in the skies is man-made or people making it up. But I said that there was a few objects that the report couldn't identify. It left it as an unknown. This is one of them. So what makes this particular sighting interesting, in my opinion, is that you have a committee who's designed to debunk everything and to come up with a logical explanation of what was seen by the witness. But yet when they look at this report, they couldn't come up with an answer. All right, next one. This is in the Winsted, Connecticut area again. Uh, Witness reported a high-pitched whine. This is what's interesting, the part in the red. Again, this relates back to that first article. Remember, I said, remember the noise and um, the points on it. Well, the noise. Here is the child said it sounded like a high-pitched jet engine. This witness is saying it sounds like a high pitched. Now, could it be two different sounds? Absolutely. But some UFO sightings do report sounds. Some don't. 90% of them are very quiet. They don't ever hear anything. But there are some, when they do, they hear something. So this matches with that particular um, pattern that these things, again, silver metallic saucer, a traditional flying saucer shaped craft. That was 15 to 20 feet in diameter, common in the sighting, the size of it. Again, going back to what the witness in Winstead said, and the um, Bob Lazar, the object moved on a steep angle after hovering in place. So the witness in Winstead in 1980 said the object was hovering in place, went on a steep angle, 45 degrees, and took off. Bob Lazar says they hover, they go on an angle, they take off. So here's another sighting that matches that. The Center for UFO Studies gave it a 50% chance that it was true. Who created this was Alan Hynek. After he left Project Blue Book because he saw so much evidence that convinced him that UFOs as an extraterrestrial, there's something out here that doesn't make sense, that it's not all imagination of people and swamp gas and balloons. Um, he left and he started his own organization to study UFOs. He called it the Center for UFO Studies. It's in Chicago. It still exists to this day. He used his scientific method, he investigated it, and he came to a 50% chance that it was true. All right. So, the Great New England Blackout, 1965. What's interesting about this is really the first time that uh, someone goes on the record, and not just anybody, but a professor um, with credentials from a reputable university goes on the record and says, hey, a UFO might have caused this particular blackout. Now, the official cause was human error. Um, that's what they are coming out with. But at the House Committee on Science and Aeronautics in July 29th, 1968, Dr. McDonald was asked by the congressman, was this possibly created by a UFO? And he said, yes, it might have been the electromagnetic effect. What's also interesting about this particular sighting or this particular event is that before, during, and after the UFO sighting, um, there was a lot of um, information. Now, all this report came, Nightcap did a great report on this. And if you haven't found it off the internet, you should get it. It's great. They did a lot of research. And what they found was that there was other articles from other newspapers talking about UFO sightings before, during, and after this event. And these are some snippets of what they found. So this is um, people seeing UFOs prior to this event happening and during and after. And here's some more. And here's some more. And here's some more. And there's some more. Okay, so Hudson Valley. So Connecticut doesn't own the Hudson Valley sighting. It's not really, but we are actually a very big part of it. The Hudson Valley is obviously Hudson Valley, New York, upstate New York. They have a great UFO festival there every year. If you haven't gone, you should go. It's a lot of fun. It's a great experience. Um, but what's interesting about this particular sighting is that during the time of the Hudson Valley flap, everyone always assumes that the sightings mostly happened in New York, and they did. We actually do have a very large spillover of UFO sightings going into the Litchfield, Fairfield County around Danbury, Newtown, Fairfield, all the way up to West Hartford, East Hartford, Hartford, New Haven, uh, up to Stafford, not Stafford, Suffield, Connecticut. So really up till you get to the Connecticut River, there was a lot of UFO sightings that also happened during the Hudson Valley flap. Alan Hynek uh, investigated this. They never really came to the conclusion of what it is. There's a lot of theories out there and speculation. Some say that the Hudson Valley UFO sightings were really uh, military technology being tested. Others say that it was extraterrestrial. This book that I put in this slideshow, Night Siege, it's an excellent book. If you haven't read it, um, I would strongly suggest it or contact your local libraries to get a copy of it because it talks about the sightings. It talks about how it was very large. It talks about how it goes into Connecticut, and Alan Hynek's position. And even to this day, we don't really know exactly what it was or what caused it. Like I said, there's a lot of speculation out there. There's a lot of theories. And I believe you can argue both cases that it was either ours or theirs that we were seeing. The other thing that's interesting about it, and what I kind of mentioned earlier, is that we still get a lot of UFO triangle sightings in Connecticut now along the Connecticut-New York border. So again, along the same towns I mentioned, except for the ones closer to the river, like West Hartford, East Hartford, but Danbury, Newtown, Fairfield, uh, up in the Litchfield County areas. Those towns up there still have UFO sightings that are triangle shaped. We do get the occasional ones in West Hartford and Farmington and like Canton, Connecticut, things closer to us. So even to this day, we still get a little bit of spillover. I don't know if this flap has 100% gone away, but it's still remnants. Every now and again, something will show up. All right, present day UFO sightings in Connecticut. So this was on Bloomfield Avenue, Cottage Grove in Bloomfield, Connecticut. I don't even know where that is. It's a very busy intersection. It was around 7:55 to 8 p.m. This is a witness recreation. So the witness created this. He put the little dots there to show the trajectory. And this is the witness's words themselves. Now, what's interesting about this particular sighting and the pattern here is the second bullet. It flipped, turned flat, and then it continues to move away from me and shifting a little bit, but with the wind. Now, you could say, maybe this is a plastic bag, maybe it's a deflated balloon. It didn't have the characteristics of that, like when you were talking to the witness. Well, what is interesting is that it turned flat, it was turning shapes, it was morphing. UFOs have started to change a little bit. Like I was saying at the beginning, we were getting a lot of triangle sightings, but now we're starting to get a lot of orb sightings. And I think, in my opinion, that's starting to become more common where, in the past, you'd see physical objects, you'd see triangles or cylinders or the traditional UFOs with the saucers, like the earlier sightings that I showed you in this PowerPoint. Modern sightings, and I don't know if it's because, different aliens are visiting us or if it's just different technology from us or them, but now we're starting to see more orbs. And these orbs sometimes look like they're almost in flux, in phase. They're moving in between dimensions, maybe. I don't know, but um, they're not always traditionally round, although many of them are. People say I see like a round object. Sometimes they look like they're kind of morphing a little bit into like something else, maybe flat, maybe um, maybe a little oblongated. It's weird. I don't know why that is, but it's starting to happen a little bit more. Maybe it has to do with people watching different TV shows like Skinwalker Ranch or some of the other UFO shows that are out there. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting and I included it in the PowerPoint because it's what we're starting to see more of. Like I said, we still get triangle sightings in Newington, Connecticut. Triangle sightings are also often seen with no sound. Sometimes you'll see a triangle sightings that has a very humming sound, like a hum or a whisper sound almost, like a low fan. Sometimes, not always. They always have three white lights on either end of it and a triangle on each corner of the triangle with a red light in the middle. Very common. Here is an orb sighting. So this was an orb in a flight formation. So the thing about these orbs is that not only do sometimes they morph and change directions and change shapes, but they also look like they're under intelligent control. When you watch a sky lantern, they're under the wind's control. So if the wind is blowing to the south, they go to the south. If the wind is variable winds, they might blow around a little bit in the sky. But orbs seem to move like they would on their own. They have their own propulsion. They have their own flight. They look like they are under some kind of intelligent control. And so they look like they have a flight formation to it. This is a triangle sighting again. Witness credibility here is important as well. All of our cases, we look at the credibility of the witness. Do they have knowledge of what our aircraft look like? Can they rule out IFOs before they go right to a UFO? In this particular case, the witness could. Also, they have the object matched. Excuse me. It was a match the characteristics of a triangle-shaped craft, blinking red light, perfect black triangle, white and red lights along the craft. All of that matched what the witness says. Okay, alien encounters. This is an interesting one. This was a witness, 14 years old, was listening to the radio in his back in his living room, saw a bright light in his window, looked out, looked to his backyard, saw this craft coming down, and when he looked at the craft, he saw what looked like these gray aliens in these suits, and this is their description. This is the witness, what they saw. This is a diagram of what was the aliens that he saw. This other craft, he couldn't really identify what it was. I'm kind of wondering, in my opinion, maybe it was a Nordic. Sometimes Nordic aliens are seen with gray aliens, um, but maybe not. So this is a case. This was in Simsbury, Farmington. It was an unknown craft in 2019. The craft was stationary. There's a lot of black triangles in this area. The witness saw it for 5 to 10 seconds. They got a good look at it. Um, they said it looked kind of jellyfish-like, but it was black. It was blocky. It was angular with the top white. Um, it had white, blue, and red lights on it. So it's a little bit different, but the description of the object, triangle matches it. Uh, what could it be? I don't know. It was very interesting. Never seen this again. This particular object, we only have this one report of with these colored lights, but the fact that it had lights and it had triangle shaped craft still matches what it was, and the witness was very credible. So I think this is truly a UFO. This is another case. This is the witness description of the object moving. It was a vertical bright light traveling in Wilcott, Connecticut. The lights turned horizontal in position. As the lights were turning, it got an outline. The witness could see an outline of a triangle with three bright lights at each point became visible. The body of the craft gave no reflection. Very common with UFO triangles. There's no reflection. Like if you look at a modern aircraft, like a commercial aircraft, you see the rivets where the metal is bolted together. These triangle craft have no rivets. They're completely smooth. They're usually a very dull color, and they don't reflect anything. Uh, all right, alien abductions. So this was happened in New Hartford, Connecticut in the mid 90s. This is the sketch of what the witness saw. Approximately 15 aliens. They were gray, 4 feet tall. The description of the aliens, if you look at these grays, are what you would normally consider for gray aliens. They had the almond colored, the almond shaped eyes. They were gray in color. There was no iris, completely black eyes, the little mouth, the little nose, telepathic communications. These alien beings usually always talk through telepathy. All right. So this one, a very credible sighting. To this day, I think it's my best sighting I've ever had, that I've investigated. I always tell my field investigators, if you stay with this long enough, you're going to have a case where you really truly don't know what it is, but you really think it is an abduction. I don't do many abduction researches. It's handled by a different department in our organization now. But before that was the case, I used to do an abductions here and there in investigations, and this is one that I worked. This witness was alone at night. It was a Friday. It was in bed. Uh, this is the bedroom. This is the bed. This is the dresser. This is the windows. The window, it was a one-story building. The windows were would go up to chest height. The dresser was a heavy dresser that blocked a window, so you couldn't really push it out of the way. And the bedroom door opened up to the hallway, which opened up to the front door. The witness went to bed. They heard a loud boom. The door swung open. They saw a bluish gray light, fog coming in. They were paralyzed. They couldn't move. They saw three gray beings coming into the bedroom. They talked to the person telepathically, saying, "Don't be afraid. It's okay." The next thing the witness remembers is they woke up the next day. We went down and we investigated the case. Um, we did radiation readings, EMF readings. We couldn't find any of that. We did leave equipment there for a week. Our equipment came back scrambled. Our video came back scrambled. We couldn't explain it. We had it looked at by electrical engineer who thinks maybe like a high electromagnetic pulse or a heavy um, um, magnet might have desensitized the hard drive, because this is back when you had the spinning hard drives, not the solid state hard drives like you have now. The witness completely believed what was there. The person was very nervous. They truly believed what was happening. To this day, we really can't explain that other than that once, then that it was an abduction. This is the one piece of evidence we gathered. This was on the witness's table um, by their bed. The other thing that was interesting about this, before I forget, other common things about abductions is the blue light from the mist is common. You see blue light. The paralysis was common. Talking um, through telepathy was common as well. This was in 2015. The witness said that these glasses were straight. They weren't warped like they were when they went to bed. But in the next day, when they woke up and this was found on the floor, that the glasses were warped. Now, in 2015, our organization did not have a lab to send these to. We would have had to have sent them to our own lab at our own cost. We're all volunteers. We did price it out to see if a lab could analyze this for trace evidence, but it was in the thousands and thousands of dollars. We didn't have that money. Had this happened in 2026, our organization does have a lab. We would have sent it there for analysis, and maybe we would have gotten some information. So one of the pitfalls of being a volunteer organization, your free money only goes so much because you have no money. It's all free in your own time. With that, I have about 10 minutes left before we're at the hour mark. I'm going to stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions. Let me stop sharing here. Does anyone?
Has anyone ever described an abduction experience, like being in a craft, or I mean, have you ever worked on a case where that is where people describe that?
So normally people will describe it in several different ways. Some people have a very enlightened experience. They have like they learn about themselves, they learn about society, they learn about humanity, about how the aliens are coming to uh, try and help us elevate our consciousness. Others, on the flip side, have the complete opposite. They have a very horrific experience. Maybe they have
Mhm.
medical experiments done on them. Maybe they have some kind of invasive procedure, or they just have a very negative or scary experience for a variety of reasons.
Mm.
Um, so the gamut runs it runs on both sides of the scale. Uh, if there's some great stories out there of documented alien abductions, like Travis Walton is a good example. Tom Reed is a good example. They're very vocal about their abductions. They talk about them a lot. Uh, you can watch a lot of their lectures for free on YouTube. So if you want to learn about their Betty and Barney Hill is a good abduction that you can read about. I mean, they were very open about their abduction experience. Betty talked a lot about what she saw when she was on the craft, about the star charts that they saw, the craft's control room. So there are some good things. There are other books out there that you might want to read, is like Dr. Jacobs, They Walk Among Us is the title. That's a good book. Talks about what his research has shown is the purpose of um, abductions. You can make your own decisions on that if you read the book. A Communion, obviously, is a good book on alien abductions. So there's a lot of very well written books and a lot of good lectures by abductees that you can find off the internet that goes into more detail on what the experiences are that they've had and what they've found that other people have. Another good researcher, if you're looking for abduction information, and I believe a lot of her lectures are online, is Kathy Martin. Kathy Martin used to run the MUFON abduction response team, and she's the expert in the field. She set a lot of the protocols that a lot of abductee researchers use in the field now. She has a lot of good books, but she also has a lot of free lectures that will talk about her research in the field and what people experience on craft. They're better experts than me on that.
Mm.
What do you think you could have found out with the glasses? And why can't you look at the glasses today?
Well, the glasses, I mean, one, I mean, the glasses have been around for a while. We have them, as you can see, they're not really, we have them in a display case. So, you know, contamination of foreign bodies, it's already been contaminated. What we could have found, I don't know. I mean, maybe we would have found, maybe, I don't know. We could have maybe found trace elements or maybe some kind of unknown DNA, or I don't know. I mean, the possibilities are endless, really. Um, but we that was in 2015 and it's 2026 and we had them under a display case. So I think they're contaminated by our own stuff, right? Our own just human. So we can't, I wouldn't test them today.
What made you feel that particular case was a true abduction as opposed to like the person having a dream, or like you talked about how he the next thing he remembered after that experience was just waking up in the morning. Was there, what was it about that case that really sort of cinched it that this was a true
So
abduction
one of the
situation?
a lot of what he was saying matched what it was. First of all, when we do a lot of research into the witness's background, the witness was not into ufology. So they didn't own any books on UFOs. So you could say, well, maybe they read about it and they're trying to hoax us. Well, we didn't find any evidence of that. So we believed him for that. The witness matched a lot of the characteristics, the blue light, the sleep paralysis, the description of the aliens, um, the fact that they talked to him through telepathy. Also, you know, witness credibility has a lot to do when you saw this particular witness. They were shaking. They were, whatever happened to them shook them to their core. And I've never seen someone that upset before. So they truly believed what was happening to them. So I went a lot towards their credibility. The protocols are a lot more stringent today than they are now. Like I said, MUFON has their own abduction response area. I don't do anything with abduction response research. I send that out to them. Um, so maybe that would have been a little different today had it been reported today and went to that field.
Mhm.
But at the time, that's what I believed. It matched a lot of the criteria.
So you study a lot about the actual craft and what people are seeing. Does that sound,
Right.
that's what
So
you?
I focus solely on craft, what people seeing. I also research things like the secret space program. Um,
Mm,
so my area, and I was telling you this before, is really involved with military aircraft, secret military aircraft. What comes of that through reverse engineering? There's a multitude of books on it. You can find all kinds of stuff on the internet. But when you start going down that rabbit hole, that's what interests me. And as just a field investigator, we would investigate sightings and craft. More specialized things of abductions would handle by a different group.
mm.
So just by the nature of that, I'm not in that group. I don't investigate alien abductions. That's handled by this other group. But I would investigate the field investigator portion of that sighting, which would be a craft or anything related to it.
So are 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 many of these craft they're categorized, the ones that you study, are most of them in the category of unknown, or are they, talked about the secret space program, things like that, like that maybe many of them are actual. You talked about reverse engineering. Does that mean
Mhm.
like reverse, like using alien technology that somehow it's
So
been captured, and
yeah,
they've actually found alien craft, and then have been able to reverse engineer that to you know, use it to, to expand technology.
so there's a lot of good information on that. So to answer your question, most of what we close cases that we're very good investigators and we can pretty much figure out what a lot of things are. Going back to that PowerPoint slide and the one I said, I think maybe 80% of what we close we can identify as an IFO. So it's like a space debris or satellites or something like that. It's man-made.
Yeah.
Um, the percentage of that that's closed, like the secret space program, is very minimal. Most of it's either insufficient data or it matches the characteristics of a UFO. So the craft moves like if you've seen those videos with the TikTok or the gimbal or the go fast, the way they kind of move erratically in the sky, those things are usually characteristics of more of like if it of a true unknown craft, and so we'll close it as that. Um, So the evidence for the secret space program or reverse engineering, well, it's hard, but there's a lot of good books out there, like Tom Carney's Wit and Don Schmidt's book, Witness to Roswell, talks a lot about, or the Real Area 51, talking about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Talk about how the Roswell crash, if with the information and the technology gained from that craft moved into possibly help shape what we have today, like transistors, fiber optics, lasers, um, memory metal, which I forget what the term they call it today, with the type of metal, but um, all came from that. And it went to like Bell Labs and other various labs out of the private sector research area. Um, so there's things like that. Uh, Hard evidence to say like that component of like the SR-71 Blackbird came from an alien craft. I have not found. Maybe that exists, but most of what you see is like a lot of that stuff comes from like the televisions on the documentaries on the History Channel or Discovery Channel, and they're kind of hyped up a little bit, but they make for great shows, and they do provide a lot of good leads that you can chase down. And that's actually how I started going down these rabbit holes. So I was a child of the 80s, and the 80s was the Learning Channel. I don't know if any of you remember that. Right now, the Learning Channel, TLC has a lot of like reality shows. But at the time when I was growing up in the 80s and early 90s, that particular channel had a lot of documentaries on military aircraft and reverse engineering of aircraft. Those have since gone to like the Discovery Channel or History Channel. But what I would used to get is I'd get a lot of leads from there. Like to talk about such and such a technology or such and such a company. And then you can go out and research that company and find where if that connection exists. And so that's really how you start going down the rabbit hole. So those documentaries or those TV shows do provide a lot of good leads. And you know, uh, sometimes they pan out, sometimes they don't. But there are a lot of great researchers. Michael Schratt is another person. He's an aviation historian who's done a lot of research on military and alien technology, and I think he puts a pretty good argument to the case that there's a lot of technology out there that, you know, might be ours, but looks otherworldly. So
Mm.
I don't know. It's it's that gray area. UFOlogy is a field in the gray. There's really no right or wrong or a black and white answer. Everything's a is a degree here or there, and um,
Mm.
depending on how you interpret or read the information or the data. That's why having evidence. That's the one thing I like about investigations. You either have the evidence or you don't have the evidence, and if you don't have the evidence, you go and look for the evidence um, to support your case. And same thing with research, but sometimes it's harder to find sources.
Anybody else have any questions? No. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing this with us, and really appreciate it. And
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the
yeah,
opportunity.
thanks. All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming.
Like you said.
We're gonna go ahead and end now, and I'm gonna just turn off the recording. Let's see. And let's see. Right. Thanks, everybody.